All right, upside. You're going to hear that word about 50 times on today's show and about 5,000 times in the next 3 months or so as we get ready for our drafts. And then it won't stop. It won't stop after that. We'll be talking about upside all throughout the season, too. It's a big word in fantasy football. We're going to give you trios of players that are ranked similarly for Dave and Jamie and probably for Heath as well. Only Dave and Jamie are here today. And we're going to talk about who has the most upside. It doesn't necessarily mean you should draft that guy first, but we'll have some fun and talk about, let's see, upside. It's like this the fifth time now that I've said that. Hello, Dave. What is on your big Batman-esque shirt?
Big Batman. This isn't Batman. This is the opposite of Batman. This says idiot.
Oh, well, it looks like
the shirt of fellow YouTuber Vegas Matt and his crew, EJ and WBG and all those guys. They've got a fun channel. Decided to support them. Got one of their shirts.
Oh, I think I thought I was the one who called people idiots.
Well, you don't have a shirt though. And for the record, they call themselves idiots. Also, it's great to wear this shirt out in public because it makes my wife cringe because people see it and they laugh and they make jokes. And she thinks that I'm an idiot for wearing a shirt that says idiot. She might be right.
No, yeah, just Jamie, good weekend, good holiday weekend?
Yes, a lot of baseball.
All right. That's what Memorial Day is about. It's kind of a baseball.
You a good weekend?
Thank you. I did have a good weekend. Thank you very much for asking. All right. Most upside. So here's one trio. We'll get to this, then we'll take a quick break and do some notes, and then we'll get back to it. But let's look at, if we assume Kelsey has the most upside at the tight end position, how about the next? You don't have to, but I didn't include him in this.
Okay.
But I'll just ask that. Does Travis Kelce have the most upside at the position?
No.
I think he does.
Really, Jamie? Who has more upside?
I mean, there's a second-year tight end that was pretty awesome last year that I think is going to be better.
Think is going to be better is different than has more upside, right?
I think he's going to have more upside because I think he will be better.
But I get it. Their best case scenario, you think LaPorta is higher than Kelsey?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, who has the most upside in this group? I think I know Jamie's answer. Sam LaPorta, Trey McBride, or Mark Andrews?
It's LaPorta, and I get where Jamie's coming from. I think that he proved last year in his first year without experience compared to where he'll be now that he can coexist in an offense where he's not necessarily the top target week in and week out and still put up good fantasy points per game. He was right around 14. 14.1 is the number that I have. And he had a lot of huge games on top of it. And I know that Trey McBride was awesome last year. We know he's got company in the passing game now in Arizona. We know that Mark Andrews' history is outstanding in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, but he's got company in the form of Derrick Henry. That guy's going to take away some touchdowns. I think that LaPorta is the one of this trio that has the most upside.
Okay, Jamie, I guess would agree. I guess I'll have to just make a case for someone else. And to me, it's Andrews. Andrews has a season where he averaged 17.5 PPR fantasy points. Dave said LaPorta averaged 14.1 last year. That's pretty much the same if you include the 3 postseason games where he was playing hurt. It's pretty much the same if you take away week 18 when he left with an injury, scored about 14 points in that game. Trey McBride, his best stretch, he averaged 15 points per game. That was 10 games after taking over for Zach Ertz. But Andrews, 17.5 PPR fantasy points. Now, can he do that again? I'm thinking no. That was a year where the Ravens threw 36 times per game. They averaged about 250 passing yards per game, by far the most in the Lamar Jackson era. But they might throw more and they might have a good passing season for them. Anyway, but he averaged 14.6 points per game, Andrews, last year if you remove week 11. That's half a point better than LaPorta. And he averaged 16.4 points per game in the first 7 games of 2022 before his injury. And then he came back and Lamar Jackson was out, and I think they threw something like 3 touchdown passes in their last 5 or 6 games of 2022. So Andrews, if I was making the case, I don't think I'm not going to make the case for McBride, but that's the case for Andrews. It's hard to say he's been better than LaPorta. I mean, it's not really fair to LaPorta. He's only had 1 year under his belt, but I don't know that LaPorta can reach the heights that Mark Andrews has reached.
Well, I think the thing that you're looking at, and this is where Travis Kelce comes in also, is that you've seen it. So you've seen it from Kelsey. You've seen it from Andrews. You know what they're capable of doing. They have the same quarterback. They're in, systems that they're familiar with. Andrews, year two, obviously Kelsey, his entire career. And it's why they're relatively safe and still relatively awesome. For LaPorta, the question is, can he do it again? And so I don't think anybody's shying away from drafting him as a top 3 tight end. If you want to compare him to Andrews, McBride, and Kelsey, he may not be first on everybody's list, but he's certainly going to be drafted, in the first 4 rounds. The other 2 guys are as well, the 2 veterans. McBride is the interesting one because, not only was he great last year for a stretch, and it was a stretch with Kyler Murray and a little bit without Kyler Murray, but now we know what they added. They added Marvin Harrison. They bring in Zay Jones. It's a change from what happened last year, where really when McBride got going, Marquise Brown was dealing with an injury, and then there was nobody else really to, steal a lot of targets. Michael Wilson had a few decent games, but clearly the talent level around him's much different. So for me, McBride is 4th, and I really struggle with McBride versus Kincaid at this point, just because I think there's as much upside for Kincaid. But I think really when you start to look at the position, it's top heavy from a different standpoint. It's not top heavy for 1 or 2 guys. It's top heavy with about 4 or 5 guys that you can say should be bunched up. We've talked about this a lot. Should be bunched up, should go in the first 5 rounds. I don't think Kincaid's going to creep into the 4th round yet. But those 5 guys I think are worth drafting at the top of the position.
Okay, so they say Sam LaPorta has the most upside. Here's another point in LaPorta's favor. Imagine that the Lions don't rush for 23 or 27 touchdowns like they have each of the last 2 years. They've been 5th in scoring or top 5 in scoring both years. They get near the goal line, they run it in so frequently. Well, what if it's 16 rushing touchdowns? What if Jared Goff can throw 35 or more? He's thrown 29 and 30, or the team has thrown 29 and 30 the last 2 years. What if it's a little bit more balanced near the goal line and you get 35 plus touchdown passes, maybe 2 or 3 more for Sam LaPorta, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown too. All right. We've got FFT Dynasty twice this week. Hope everybody had a great weekend. It's thrown off our schedule just a little bit. Instead of Monday, Wednesday, well, what would we be? Monday, Wednesday, Thursday? Is that what we were? Now we're Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. Next week will be 4 shows a week. So we've got plenty of content for you. The Dynasty podcast twice a week. I'm going to start our rookie draft in the Baked Burger League. By the way, I made burgers yesterday, but because it was Memorial Day, I said, you know what? Let's do it right. I don't have a grill, but let's use the stovetop and not bake them so they're not terrible. So I did that for all of you out there. They were good. But yeah, we have plenty of fantasy content coming your way and great stuff on the website, cbssports.com/fantasy. And our terrible baseball commissioner still has not changed our record. I just wonder
What could that be?
He's the worst. I mean, he's just such a... I hope you're listening, Jack, because you're just a terrible commissioner. All right, I've got a few things here. I want to know if you think they're nonsense or if you think they're fantasy relevant. So you get a lot of stories right now. Look, there's not a lot to write about. So you get these quotes and they become headlines. And let's see, are they nonsense or fantasy relevant? Anthony Richardson says he won't change the way he plays. He won't change his style of play. You think that's nonsense?
Yeah, I want that. I don't want him to suddenly become cautious.
Well, you're buying that. He's going to be the same guy.
Not only am I buying it, I'm pleased because that's what got him drafted. That's what got him the attention that he needed to become an interesting NFL prospect. And you saw the production in a couple of games last year. I'm very happy with that.
Do you think this note from The Athletic is nonsense, or do you think it's legit? It's fantasy relevant. Nick Kosmider of The Athletic thinks it's going to be tough for Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Samaje Perine to keep their roles from last season.
I buy it. I mean, they added another guy to the mix in Estime that, is another one that Sean Payton has brought in as opposed to Javonte, who he inherited. And look, I still think Javonte should be the best of the bunch if he's going to get the playing time and the touches. But if he's not going to get the playing time and the touches, then it's going to be very difficult clearly for him to be the most productive. But this is a coach that's proven to use multiple guys, whether it's 2 running backs or 2 running backs and a wild card in Taysom Hill, so he's not afraid to, get the most production from whoever he thinks is going to give him that on that particular player, that particular situation. So we'll see how they're going to use these guys. I'm still curious, Denver's one of these teams, I don't know if there's anybody that's trade worthy, but there's a team out there that needs a running back. And, I've said this with Khalil Herbert, there's a few other situations. Dameon Pierce, you could throw in the conversation too, although there was a note this weekend about his role for Houston. But there's some teams that have a glut at the position, and Denver is one of them. And so you wonder if they cut somebody, Samaje would probably make the most sense if they're going to cut someone. But if they cut somebody, does that player become more attractive elsewhere? But if they all stay on the Broncos, it's just very difficult to say one guy is going to dominate touches. And that's frustrating for the Javonte Williams truthers.
I'm sorry. Did you mention Blake Watson on the Broncos?
No, he's part of it too. He's another guy that they like.
Yeah, because that's what was mentioned in the article in The Athletic. Look, this one might be kind of nonsense, but Blake Watson, he had 53 catches last year with Memphis. He's an undrafted free agent. And Cosmiter writes that he was particularly impressive Thursday, demonstrating the pass catching ability that made him one of the best receiving backs in the country last season. We will continue this game of nonsense or fantasy relevant after a quick break on fantasy football today, and then we'll get into our upside. Like, who has the most upside in the group of Davante Adams, Michael Pittman, and Deebo Samuel? Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Malik Nabers. We'll talk about that after this break.
The best couch potatoes come from Pluto TV country.
And these taters, they like all sorts of different things.
Survivor Channel, Ink Master Channel.
If it's got a spaceship in it, I'm probably watching it.
3 channels dedicated to CSI.
Whatever mood you're in, it's going to be easy watching.
All right, is this nonsense or is it fantasy relevant? Patrick Mahomes said that Andy Reid is pushing the Chiefs to push the ball downfield.
It's fantasy relevant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're hoping for that.
I wonder if this is just like part of their off-season workouts, and then when the games start, it's two high safeties nonstop, and they're forced to throw it short.
Let's take a second and make this about me.
Oh, great.
I've got this horrible pick in our dynasty draft, 7th in the rookie draft.
You want to trade?
You have what? No, I don't want to trade back. I want to trade up. I want to get one of the top 3 receivers. But at 7, I'm thinking about Xavier Worthy. It would be him over Brock Bowers.
That's the range for him. It's it's Jonathan Brooks' range. It's Brock Bowers' range. It's where the receivers start to become a little muddy, especially in Superflex with the quarterbacks who may or may not be coming off the board at that particular point with McCarthy and Drake May, whoever you like better. So yeah, you have a tough call.
Yeah, I want to trade. Nonsense or fantasy relevant? Dan Campbell says that
James made a big trade in our dynasty draft.
Oh, did he?
Not a big trade.
What was it?
I traded draft picks to move up and get Roman Wilson. I had to get my boy.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if he would have been there though for your
nope. Because as soon as I made the pick, the team that I traded with sent me a text and said, "Oh, I wanted him."
Nice.
Always a good feeling when you get that text.
All right. Dan Campbell said
also ripped off Chris Towers.
Jameson Williams.
See, that's the big trade that we should have talked about.
Hold on.
And I hope Heath talks about it on
Hold on. Dan Campbell said that Jameson Williams is a man on a mission. Nonsense or fantasy relevant?
Is he rolling with Mo, Oscar, and Mabel? You won't get that, Adam.
No idea.
Yeah, listen, it's been lots of positive quotes about Jameson Williams all off season long. Let's see what training camp brings. One of those receivers that you can get in the middle of your draft that has, what's that word that we're using 50 times today, Adam?
Upside.
Yeah, he's got all of it. So if he can put it all together in his 3rd year, watch out, because he was fantastic in college. He just has to be able to, like I just said, put it all together.
I just got a trade offer for Jameson Williams in the Dynasty League of Jameson and Tua at Superflex. Jameson and Tua for JJ McCarthy, Ben Sinnott, and a 2nd-round pick next year.
Oh wow! I think I'd definitely rather have the Jameson and Tua side.
I would too, but I don't think my team is ready to win, and so giving up a 2nd-round pick in Superflex is not exactly the most ideal for me. So I'm going to counter.
Oh, okay, yeah, counter. How about this one? Baltimore coordinator Todd Monken has seen tremendous growth from Rachaad Bateman, and this is not the first Rachaad Bateman story. I think it was Harbaugh who said he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, that's what started all this.
Relevant.
I'm just worried that people are going to overdraft Bateman and take him in that round 7-8 range. Like, there will be so much hype around him by the time we get to August that people will reach for him. And I don't think he's worth reaching for.
I agree.
Good 100%. Player, but Not worth reaching for.
It's the loss of Beckham. It's a former first round talent. It's still a team that wants to run the ball very much with the addition of Derrick Henry. And then you have what he's done in his career, which hasn't been much. So great late round flyer. Could be the first guy you cut.
Okay, for Bateman, yeah. But he cannot have a good season for the sake of Zay Flowers. I'd feel like it's just like, we've never seen this team with three in the Jackson era with three fantasy relevant pass catchers. Right? Usually it's like one.
I don't know if we've ever seen this team with three fantasy relevant pass catchers.
But that would, if Bateman has a good season, either Jackson just runs away with the MVP or something, or I feel like, do you feel that way, that Flowers would be disappointing?
You could see a path to this happening if Derrick Henry goes down and they don't have a running game that they trust, and then it's all on Lamar. And so, yes, he could have another huge season, but more so throwing than running. But look, they're talented players. Andrews has proven himself. Flowers had a good rookie season, and Bateman's a former first round pick. So, it's just a good late round pick. That's all you want to do. Don't stress about it.
Well said.
Houston head coach DeMeco Ryans says he thinks of Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon as a 1-2 punch. Nonsense or fantasy relevant?
Nonsense.
I agree. He'll learn that it's nonsense 3 or 4 weeks into the season.
Christian Watson may have figured out the root of his hamstring problems.
This was actually an interesting story.
Might be the greatest quote we've had all year, and maybe one of the greatest quotes in a long time.
What was it?
I don't want to misquote him, so I'm going to you talk about it, Dave, and I'll just get the quote word for word.
It was something about how he had.
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
I don't know what I should or shouldn't say now.
The quote from
Christian
Watson himself,
hamstrings,
was, quote, "For me, it really was the asymmetry between the legs."
That's what it is.
Yeah, no, so like one of his legs was just a lot stronger than the other one, so he's trying to even out, I think, the muscle mass in the hamstrings or the legs or something.
Right. Glad you said hamstring.
Could be big. And then
could be big.
That is fantasy relevant. And then Aaron Rodgers said that Malachi Corley was his favorite wide receiver in the draft.
What a coincidence that the Jets took his favorite wide receiver. Do you think if they had taken Adonai Mitchell, he would have said the same thing? Or Brock Bowers?
Did you see
Brock Bowers was my favorite pass catcher in the draft?
The fallout from this, by the way, from Amani Rodgers.
No.
Because he was one of the draft picks toward the end of Rodgers' tenure there in Green Bay. And I believe Corley is going to live with Rodgers, if I got the story correct, that he's allowing him to stay in his house and is like taking him under his wing. And Amani Rodgers said, "I never got this kind of treatment."
Well, Amani Rodgers also got to live with Amani Rodgers. Just a few quick news items here. Sean Payton said that wide receiver Tim Patrick is one of the leaders in the wide receiver room. Remember Tim Patrick? He's missed 2 straight seasons with training camp injuries, but maybe he throws a wrench in some of the.
I said Amani to Amari Rodgers. Sorry,
Amari Rodgers. Yes. Greg Dulcich expected to be ready for training camp, and Sauce Gardner might shadow wide receivers, which will be good for my mental health because I feel like I rant about that every time he doesn't shadow a wide receiver and the Jets lose because some wide receiver did too well against them because Sauce Gardner did not shadow them. Back to the most
Jaylen Waddle in every Dolphins Jets game.
Jaylen Waddle, I think the biggest play of the year for Jaylen Waddle came against Sauce Gardner. If not the biggest, one of the biggest plays of the year. He was one of the only guys who did well against Sauce Gardner. Davante Adams, Michael Pittman, and Deebo Samuel. You might be on the clock thinking about these 3 guys. Davante, Pittman, and Deebo Samuel. Who has the most upside, Dave?
This was an awesome trio that you put together because I think you can make the case for all 3. But I eliminated Pittman first because of his situation, because of his quarterback, because Indianapolis still strikes me as a run-first team, and they added another pass catcher in Adonai Mitchell. Now, Adams has been amazing, and I hate to use that as the crutch argument for why he's got the most upside of this group. And his offense changed quarterbacks, added Brock Bowers. You know the whole drill. Nothing really changed with Deebo in San Francisco. And last year, he averaged 17 PPR points per game. But I think Davante could be better than that. And we just saw a year where Minshew peppered his number one wide receiver with targets. It was Pittman, and Pittman had a very good season. I think Adams could be better. Adams is also on a team that won't necessarily cram it with the running back when they're in the red zone. I think that Adams is the one that has the most upside, but it's really close. And if there's an argument to be made for Deebo, I think it's obvious because of what he can do as a rusher and the offense that he's in. And these are all three very good high-end number two fantasy wide receivers.
Deebo has the most upside, mostly because of an injury, and that's when I think we've seen him spike in terms of the non-2021 season when he first started doing all of his rushing production. In terms of if everybody stays healthy, Pittman has the most upside. Davante's going in the wrong end of his career from an age standpoint. He's on a team that's going to run the ball just as much as any of these guys, based on what we saw at the end of last season. They added a significant piece in terms of the passing game with Brock Bowers. And there's no guarantee Gardner Minshew is going to be the quarterback. It could be Aiden O'Connell, which was good for Adams in that stretch when White was carrying the ball. But I also think, again, you're looking at a player that's starting to, I think, hit the decline in his career as opposed to the upside. I'll take Pittman for the unknown. And the unknown is Anthony Richardson. And so if Richardson shows the glimpses as a passer that we saw in the first 4 games of the season when he was, trying to learn the NFL and I think surprised a lot of people by how he threw the ball. If the touchdowns go up for Pittman and the targets stay relatively the same, he could have a huge season, a monster campaign. So while, yes, Mitchell is there, and that's going to be a factor, I don't know how much of a factor that will be with Josh Downs as well, with what they get maybe from the other parts, tight end out of the running back position as well. But Pittman, to me, has the most upside if Anthony Richardson is as good as advertised. Deebo from an injury standpoint, Pittman from a production standpoint, Davante's the one that scares me the most.
Yeah, Pittman was wide receiver 18 per game last year, but he only caught 4 touchdowns. In his last 3 seasons, Pittman has 6. Listen to this. He has 6, 4, and 4 touchdown catches, Michael Pittman, and he's led his team in touchdown catches all 3 years.
Yeah, this is a team that loves to run when they get in the red zone.
Yeah, but they've thrown 27 touchdown passes, which was a lot 3 years ago, but the last 2 years, only 17 and 18. So that could go up. But this stat really blew my mind for Deebo Samuel. In week 7, I believe, he played 15% of the snaps. In week 18, he played 33% of the snaps. So, of course, let's take those games out. He averaged like 18.5 fantasy points per game, 18.3. If you take away those partial games as Deebo Samuel, that would have made him wide receiver 6 per game. I mean, that really shocked me.
Does that include a game where Ayuk didn't play?
Yeah, it includes everything.
Right.
So there is that. But yeah.
Obviously, if Ayuk goes down, Deebo's going to have a huge swing in terms of
target. Well, I mean, there is a change. Pearsall's there now, so we'll see what that matters.
Yeah. Let's go to the next trio here.
Who do you have ranked?
This was the most difficult one, though, of the ones you had.
I agree.
Oh.
How do you have them ranked, the 3 of them?
Pittman, Adams, Deebo.
I've got Adams, Pittman, Deebo. That's full PPR.
All right, next up, who's got the most upside? Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, or Malik Nabers?
Godwin.
I'll say Nabers.
I thought this one was maybe tougher. Except it's kind of hard to say Ridley here, isn't it?
Not hard. I mean, Heath would argue for Ridley. He's a big fan.
Okay. All right, Jamie, make your Godwin case. Godwin, Ridley, Nabers. Jamie said Godwin, Nabers for Dave, and Heath, yes, said Ridley.
He's going back in the slot, so that's when we've seen his best production, and I'm excited to see him, hopefully get back to the target share that he was, dealing with prior to last year, and running routes that he's more comfortable with. Obviously, it's a change going from Brady to Baker, and we saw that was a big downgrade for Godwin last year. And then you factor in that the one game that Mike Evans missed, Godwin was an absolute superstar. And so if that happens again, then you could see a huge year coming for Godwin. But to me, I just like his situation the best. Ridley's a little bit of a wild card, mostly because of Will Levis. If Levis is good, Ridley could be amazing. And obviously Nabers going in his rookie season, but we know rookie receivers for the most part take a little bit of time before they get going. So I'll take what Godwin has done in the slot over the other 2 guys.
How about this in Godwin's final 5 games? And this is just for everybody who's listening that's going, really, Godwin? Is he even in this conversation? He should be. Final 5 games last year, he averaged 9 targets per game, 15.7 PPR points. He was really healthy for those last 5 games. And he was dealing with something through the first 2/3 of the year. And that's why his production was down. Don't forget, a couple of years ago, 16.8 PPR points per game. I'd have to look it up to see how much he played in the slot in 2021, but he's got that potential to be north of 15. I just think he's got a lot of downside too, because Evans is still playing at a high level in Tampa Bay. I chose Nabers because to me, defining upside means a player gets tons of opportunities and he can do things to create yardage, create stats, create touchdowns, etc. And I think Nabers could have those opportunities in New York. I don't like the quarterback situation very much, but I also think that the Giants don't have much of a choice. They've got to figure out a way to put up some points. Nabers is going to be their best option now that Saquon's gone. I think they're going to be trailing in a lot of games. It would not surprise me if Nabers flirted with 8 targets per game this year. And I think he could have some pretty good efficiency based on how well he moves, man. Just lightning fast acceleration and just the ability to make some plays after the catch. I think he's got that like little edge to him, ahead of Ridley, who used to be like that, but he's older now, and ahead of Godwin, who doesn't do that. Godwin's going to need volume. He's going to need 8 or 9 targets per game in order to be at the top of this trio.
Godwin, this is what's so frustrating about fantasy football, about, predicting stats. Godwin, 3-season stretch, 2018 to 2020, he had 24 touchdown catches. He had 7, 9, and 7. In 2021 to 2023, the last 3 years, he has 10 touchdown catches. And a lot more targets over the last 3 years than the 3 previous. So, 5 touchdowns in his last 2 years combined for Chris Godwin. And, it's pretty easy to see him scoring at least 15 PPR fantasy points per game, which he did 4 years in a row before last year. All right.
There's also an ACL tear in there too that he had to come through.
That's fair.
When was the ACL tear?
2021.
Okay. So Godwin, Ridley, Nabers. We get a Godwin, we get a Nabers. Let's go to DJ Moore, Jaylen Waddle, and Stefon Diggs is our next trio. DJ Moore, Jaylen Waddle, and Stefon Diggs. Who has the most upside out of Moore, Waddle, Diggs?
I'll say Moore, but I think that it's fairly close between him and Waddle.
For me, it's Waddle by a significant margin.
Okay, so not Diggs. Moore for Dave, Waddle for Jamie, and a significant margin, Jamie.
Yeah, look, Moore is going to a rookie quarterback with a very crowded receiving core. Diggs is going to a very crowded receiving core with a quarterback who has to get used to him. Waddle's in the same situation, coming off a very disappointing season last year where injuries, for the most part, played the biggest part. You saw what he was able to accomplish 2 years ago, and I think he gets back to that. And, you also have the situation where you have a 30-year-old Tyreek Hill, who we saw one game missed for him last year. I believe it was Jets game that you referenced, Adam, where he had the big game against Sauce Gardner, or big play against Sauce Gardner. And Waddle was a monster. And so I think just based on the team that he plays for, yes, there's some new additions, Odell Beckham, Malik Washington, Jonnu Smith, if you want to factor those guys in. It's still Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle as the top 2 guys, and it's a 1 and 1A, based on how they operate and the targets that they'll get. And so Moore, I think, will still be good. Stefon Diggs hopefully will still be good. To me, Waddle has a chance to be fantastic. He's a round 2 pick.
If Tyreek Hill goes down, Waddle is the correct answer. There's no question about it. I don't like that Waddle has only 6 games in his last 22 with at least 15 PPR points. I wish that he was a little bit more productive. I wish that he had broken out in games with Tyreek Hill already. That would make me feel good about his upside play if Tyreek Hill was still on the field. I just don't know if that's going to happen. What we saw last year from DJ Moore, 13 games. This is with Justin Fields, 8.2 targets per game. We know that those targets weren't always on point. He averaged 19 PPR points per game. I do expect his target volume to go down a little bit. And we can't say for sure that Caleb Williams is going to be a better thrower than Justin Fields was. I think he can be. Can't say it definitively. There was a bad report about Bears 7-on-7 drills from OTAs that Caleb didn't look good there. But I think that DJ Moore can still command the most targets out of the trio in Chicago. And I think that he still has big playability in his back pocket. He can still be the best of these three.
Okay. Just gonna say this a lot over the next, I've said it a lot already, but you'll hear it over the next few months. It's easy to forget. Jaylen Waddle, he played more than 70% of the snaps in 13 of 17 games in 2022. In 2023, Jaylen Waddle played more than 70% of the snaps in 6 of 14 games. That is my biggest argument for Jaylen Waddle, is the guy just didn't play enough last year for a variety of reasons. And it was really good in 2023, averaged over 15 fantasy points, 2022, sorry, over 15 fantasy points per game. Of course, that wasn't nearly as good as what DJ Moore did last year. So DJ Moore for Dave, Jaylen Waddle for Jamie, Stefon Diggs for no one. We'll take a break. We got some running back trios to talk about when we come back. Stick around. Much more to come. Upside Talk on Fantasy Football Today.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Travis Etienne, Rachaad White, James Cook. I do think that Etienne is going. Is this an easy one? Was this stupid? Is it Etienne?
Etienne, Cook, and who? Walker?
Rachaad White.
Oh, Rachaad White. It's Etienne, but
It is.
I can see James Cook having a bigger season. I'll say Cook.
Oh, I like it. I think Jamie's just doing that to keep the show interesting, so I appreciate that.
No, I do think he has more upside. I mean, you look at what Etienne accomplished last year, and you have the story brewing of taking away more work and making sure he's fresh, and whether that's Bigsby or Johnson or whatever else they decide to do with their backfield. I mean, look, James Cook, yes, Ray Davis was brought in. Is he going to take James Cook off the field? We saw what the coordinator change was last year for Cook and how he finished the season. And I think from a receiving standpoint, White and Cook are probably better than Etienne right now. And Cook might be in a better spot than White based on the Bucky Irving addition. So in an offense that's lost its top two pass catchers from a year ago, at least based on targets and production, there's a lot to like about Cook as a receiver. If he doesn't come off the field for, the rushing touchdowns that he loses, and he gets to 10 total touchdowns, if not 10 rushing touchdowns, I mean, that's a huge stretch with Josh Allen there. But I mean, if that happens, he's going to be an absolute monster. So it wouldn't surprise me if Cook is the best of the bunch. I'll still draft Etienne first, but Cook is right behind him.
To Jamie's point, after the coordinator change last year in Buffalo, James Cook averaged 17.3 PPR points per game. And that's over 11 games from week 11 on, I should say. That's awesome. And that's more than what Etienne averaged, but it's not by much. Etienne was at 16.6 in full PPR. I am leery of putting too much stock into Buffalo running backs. The track record has been very clear. We know what Josh Allen's capable of doing, not just overall, but in the red zone. I don't think they're going to try and take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands even more. I love Cook too. Very talented, but I think Etienne is the one who's a little bit proven already and still has all kinds of explosiveness to his game. We still haven't seen him get unleashed as far as the pass catcher goes. I'd love to see that in Jacksonville. I hope that's what they add to the offense. I'm still going to take Etienne. It's the boring answer, but I think it's the right answer.
Yeah. I think he's still Etienne. I think he had about 50 catches last year. So it's like, want to see more. He had 58. He had 58 catches. He's still pretty
the quietest 58 catches you'll ever hear.
Because he never had more than 5 in a game. He never had a game where like, holy cow, he just PPR'd my team to a victory. But it was basically 3 or 4 almost every single week for Etienne. Yeah. All right. We can move on to our next one here. And that would be Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and Ken Walker. Who has the most upside? Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and Ken Walker.
I'll take Mixon.
I'll take Kamara, but it feels gross to say. It feels gross not to say Walker, but I think it's just the situation that Walker's in Seattle.
I think Walker has the least upside because of exactly what you said.
I hate it. Because he's talented, man. I think he's a talented running back, but he's in a tough spot and he hasn't played great his first 2 seasons. And this is an offense that I think wants to throw the ball. I think they'll be a 180 of what they were with Pete Carroll as head coach.
Yeah. Okay. So wait. So you said Kamara. Jamie said Mixon for the most upside. Kamara, Mixon, Walker.
Yeah.
Okay. Kamara was what? He was number 4 per game in full PPR, number 8
Yeah.
per game in half PPR, number 16 per game in non PPR. So it could be format specific. But Jamie, if Kamara was 4th per game in full PPR, on pace for 103 catches if you remove one partial game, week 17, why does he not have the most upside in this group? You picked.
I will draft him first, but again, I'm kind of leaning toward the unknown here, Mixon in this offense. And so, we saw what Devin Singletary did. I think Mixon's a better player than Singletary, whether you want to argue who's a better rudder. That's certainly up for debate. But I like the offense for Houston. I think that's going to benefit Mixon. I think also we'll see him, have a chance for double-digit rushing touchdowns. I don't think that's the case for Kamara. As you've certainly noted time and time again, Adam, the fact that the Saints have kept Taysom Hill and made him such a priority this offseason to stay on the roster is a big no-no for Alvin Kamara. No, but it's still a factor. Taysom Hill.
It is. Yeah.
I think Kendra Miller will have a bigger role. So, again, I would draft Kamara first. I think he's the safest of the trio. But I if we're just talking upside here, I'll take the unknown of Mixon because I think he'll be involved in the passing game. And I think he has the most touchdown potential of this group.
And you can start with Mixon's track record, too, if you wanted to. He's been over 15 PPR points per game each of the last 4 seasons. It's in Cincinnati. This is a different landing spot for him, but it's an offense that he should be suitable to play in. And just thinking about all those receivers and all the speed and all the size that Houston now has with C.J. Stroud under center, should be a bunch of light boxes for Mixon. Hopefully he can make it count. And Jamie, I think you're right. I think he can get to double-digit touchdowns, but it's still going to be those catches that keep Kamara ahead of Mixon.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. It's also an age thing. Kamara's getting to that point where you got to worry about his.
Yeah, but Mixon's right behind him. It's not like Mixon's a young spring chicken.
Kamara will be 29 years old in July. Yeah. And over the last 3 seasons, Taysom Hill has 16 rushing touchdowns. Kamara has 11. Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams.
Well, this is the upside group.
Well, I mean, you are talking about Nick Chubb, who's obviously been one of the best running backs in football. You're talking about Aaron Jones, who's the lead running back for Minnesota. They're going to score some points.
I hope he's the lead running back for Minnesota.
He'll be the lead running back. So, yeah, I'm not going to. I mean, and then there's Javonte. Javonte's coming off a torn ACL. We can talk about all the names in the backfield. I don't know that there's anyone that's all that good in the Broncos backfield. I like McLaughlin, but Jones, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams. Dave, who has the most upside?
If Nick Chubb is right, he's got the most upside. But that's asking a lot for him, given how his injury has progressed since September. So I think by default, you've got to say Aaron Jones because we don't know what Nick Chubb's going to be when he's going to be back on the field. And we don't know if Javonte Williams is going to be on the field at all because of the competition in Denver. So Jones has my vote, but it's by default.
I'm going to change the question slightly. I'm going to say which backfield has the most upside. And I'm going to say the Browns backfield has the most upside.
I don't like what you're doing there. This is not acceptable.
Well, I mean, there's reasons to be concerned about all 3 of these guys. And Dave's right. If we're just going based on, each individual player, Jones has the most upside because it's hard to say if Chubb stays healthy because he's coming back from a significant injury, whereas Jones fought through injuries last year, was miserable in the regular season, and then got that 5-game stretch, to close the year, including the playoffs, where he was a star, but it didn't help a lot of fantasy managers except for the people that were in the semifinals and the playoffs and the championship. So I think just based on individual players, Jones, if he stays healthy, Javonte, if he's the clear guy in the backfield, then it's him, but it's hard to say. So I'll take the Cleveland Browns backfield with the hope that Nick Chubb is right.
Okay.
All right, I got that for one more. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll move on then. Next one. We'll go to CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott.
Related to Amani Richards, Roger.
CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow. Who's got the most upside?
This was a fun one to think about. I'm going to say Stroud.
So I'm going to critique your next one, which I believe is the Richardson one. And Richardson should have been in this one and not Dak. I know why you did Richardson with the other ones, but Richardson should be in this group, not Dak in terms of upside.
That's not fair. That is ridiculous because Dak. No, it's not ridiculous. That's
It's
the whole
upside.
point. Nobody thinks about Dak Prescott as an upside guy. I think that's.
Of
I should
course
say,
not.
but he is. He is an upside guy. I think he's proven that. I mean, he's been.
I think he's again, let's backtrack for a second because for people that aren't aware, we always refer to 6 points for passing touchdowns. We've had some guests on that have had Richardson in their top 5, and understandably so. For 6 points for passing touchdowns, Dak does belong in this group. But in terms of upside, I think Richardson is more in this group than he is the next group, just because the unknown and young quarterback would rise. For me, I'll take Stroud. I think just based on what he showed last year, the addition of Diggs, and hopefully getting better in year 2, I'll buy that.
Almost 28 points per game, 6 point per passing touchdowns in 7 games where both Nico and Tank Dell played at least 60% of the snaps each. And now that he's adding Diggs.
Like, give me that stat again. Jamie, you're leaving?
In a second, yeah.
27.8 fantasy points per game, 6 point passing touchdowns.
Now that includes the 50-point game, right?
Yes. 7 games with Nico and Dell playing at least 60% of the snaps each.
Right. It's such a weird season for Stroud because that game boosted everything clearly. And then right after that, he lost Dell. So we don't know how he would have finished. Plus, he had some injury concerns where he missed the game also. So it's still a little bit of an unknown to say, okay, he should be drafted ahead of these other 2 guys. But again, you're buying into what he showed you in spurts. It's a stretch, not spurts, a significant stretch. And then everybody coming back with the addition of Diggs, healthy Dell and a addition that's as good, if not better, than anybody else got all offseason.
And I don't want to discount Stroud just because of the one big game. 3 of his first 4 games in the NFL, he was over 24 fantasy points per game.
And I know Adam will bring this up. It makes a ton of sense. What Joe Burrow has done in his career when healthy, with a healthy T. Higgins and a healthy Jamar Chase, and now Jermaine Burton, who may be better than Tyler Boyd. It's an ask, but it might happen. Better than Stroud last year with what he's able to accomplish.
Well, 2022 in the 9 games where the big 3 of Burrow, Chase, and Higgins were healthy. See you later, Jamie. Thank you for hopping on. He averaged 28.5 points per game. So Burrow actually would have been my pick of most upside between Stroud, Prescott, and Joe Burrow. I would have said Joe Burrow. He's just look. I know that Joe Burrow is a great quarterback, and if those guys are healthy, I know what he can do. I don't really have a lot of doubts about C.J. Stroud. I believe in him, but there is something to be said about having to do it again. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. I mean, we all were expecting a big jump from Baker Mayfield after a record-setting rookie season. Justin Herbert's had kind of an up and down year after a record-setting rookie season. Career. I mean, Herbert's great. It's not like a great example, but it doesn't always work out that way. I have more faith in Burrow to hit that ceiling than I do Stroud. But that doesn't mean I don't have faith in Stroud. I am a big believer in Joe Burrow. I'm completely throwing out last year. And, he's Joe Burrow. He's the man. And so is Chase and Higgins. So are.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I think it is close between Burrow and Stroud. But I do think that I do wonder if Stroud just has a little bit more upside because his receiving core is deeper than it is for Burrow. And Burrow obviously has a couple of injury issues of his own that he's got to deal with.
Okay. Let's go to our next one here. And Jamie was referring to this one. Who has the most?
One we can zip right through.
No, we can't. Okay. Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels.
The entirety of why we're drafting all 3 of these quarterbacks is upside. 2 of them we've never seen play in the NFL. We're seeing what we saw as gospel from their college days. And Richardson's played 2 full games in the NFL, 4 total. I think Richardson's the one that has the most upside.
Okay. I respect your opinion. Been thinking about this though. I said this, I think last week. If Anthony Richardson had not played last year, he'd probably be last on this list.
Yeah, like if he were a rookie this year, you mean?
Yes. He's I think, regarded as the worst prospect of these three quarterbacks, which is saying something for a guy who went 4th overall. But
as a thrower, I would agree.
Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels is who we're talking about here. Is he a better runner than Caleb Williams? Well, he's going to run more than Caleb Williams, but is he a better runner than Jayden Daniels? I don't know. I mean, that's a wash, right? That's pretty much a toss-up.
I think what would give Richardson the edge for me is that he's just like a phenomenal athlete with size. And we know that Daniels is a good runner. I don't think he's as good of a runner as Richardson. I've watched them both. I think that Richardson's probably just a little bit better. And I know that it's easy to say, oh, yeah, Richardson, he's stronger. And he just missed 13 games last year with a shoulder injury, which makes you a little bit worried about Daniels and whether or not he can hold up. We've had that conversation.
Yes.
I think that Richardson has already shown us, it's teeny tiny sample size, but 2 games where he started and finished, 28.3 fantasy points averaged in those games. That's crazy upside. That's the argument.
I know, but the argument is you're talking about, I mean, I would even say 3 games because week 2 or whatever, when he scored like 17 points in a quarter, basically, his upside was unbelievable. But that's a really small sample size. Caleb Williams has arguably the best receiving core in the NFC. I mean, it's up there, right? He's got that going for him. They both, I think, have better supporting casts than Anthony Richardson. I don't think this is as cut and dried. I mean, if I did a Twitter poll on this, I think most people would say Richardson. I get it.
I think so too.
I think I would probably say Richardson as well. But I keep going back to it. Should I be drafting Anthony Richardson as a top 5 quarterback when I can just take Jayden Daniels 5 rounds later? That's part of this.
When have we seen Richardson go as a round 5 pick?
Top 5 pick. Top 5 quarterback. I didn't say round 5, but
in our consensus ranks, he's at 90, which is
we have
outstanding. If I'm getting him at 90th overall, I'm thrilled.
We have quarterbacks lower than the way they're going to get drafted.
The general public, sure.
All right, you say Richardson, that's fine. Accept your response. Last one, a foursome. Patrick Mahomes, they're golfing. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. Who has the most upside? Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Jackson.
In golf?
Yeah, sure.
I think I would still lean toward Allen in the upside department just because of how diabolical he is as a runner and how strong his arm is and just how dangerous he is of a stat producer. He can get you 30 plus, no problem. It's just a matter of, does he have the talent around him to do it still? And if he can cultivate it, if they can make that happen in Buffalo, I'm going to feel pretty stupid not having him as my QB1. And listen, all these guys have huge upside. There's a reason why there's a clear-cut top 4 amongst the fantasy quarterbacks. I think Allen's the one that's got the most upside of the 4. I'm just a little bit nervous about whether or not he reaches it in his first season without Diggs and without who's his number 1 receiver right now. Is it going to be Kincaid? Is it Keon Coleman? Is it Khalil Shakir? I don't think he's got one. And we just saw a year where Mahomes didn't necessarily have a studly number 1 receiver that he leaned on for big production week in and week out. And he was averaging around like 21 fantasy points per game.
Oh, man, this is so funny because talk about these top 4 quarterbacks. Who has the most upside? Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Jackson. I think Jackson has maybe the least upside.
Is that because Derrick Henry's there and you're worried about the Henry effect?
I meant Josh Allen. I think Allen maybe has the least upside, which is crazy. But I do think losing Diggs is a big deal. And I don't think that you can say that Allen has more upside than Hurts because he's not going to blow away Hurts as a rusher. In fact, Hurts might have more rushing statistics in terms of yards plus touchdowns than Allen. And then you can't look at their receiving cores and be like, Allen has more upside as a passer. So I would not have answered Josh Allen. Of course, I'm not going to say that you're dumb or you're wrong, or I'm not going to call you an idiot like your t-shirt. But I just think that Hurts is like a better version of Josh Allen now with this extremely lackluster receiving core, in my opinion.
I get that. I get that.
Underwhelming receiving core.
How many rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts this year? Now that Saquon's there,
I'm still gonna give him 10.
Okay. Does he throw for as many touchdowns with Saquon Barkley there?
That's a great question.
And the nitpicking is what we're just going to have to do with these four. Because, again, you can make the case for all four of them to be the one with most upside.
My answer is Hurts and 4-point, Mahomes and 6-point.
Okay.
Yeah. And your answer
I respect that too, sir. I respect you, Booker man.
I think a lot of this is really just for fun,
Sure, but here, how about this is the takeaway for this specific question? Maybe you shouldn't be the first guy to take a quarterback in your fantasy draft. Maybe you should be the guy to take the third or fourth quarterback off the board.
Yep.
To land one of these four super high upside passers.
You don't always have that luxury. Okay, so realistically, forget about our drafts when they go in round 4. Let's say you're at the 2-3 turn or something like that. Or let's say you get into round 3. You think there's any chance we won't have a quarterback in the first 2 rounds?
I've already done a couple of mocks with our audience. By the way, thanks to everybody who's emailed in. I've gotten every single email. You're on the list. You're on the list. Quarterbacks are sliding. They're not going early.
Okay, so let's say
I'm kind of proud of the audience for that one.
Yeah, let's say that there's no quarterbacks taken in the first 2 rounds. Round 3, you got the third pick of round 3. You're not going.
Quarterbacks go.
You're not going to get. There's a decent chance that you're not going to get any of the top 4 in the 4th round.
And that's where the earlier conversation about Stroud, Dak, Burrow, and Anthony Richardson thrown in there comes into play. Maybe that's the group to target because you're getting them even later, and their downside is larger than the first 4, but their upside maybe isn't quite as high, but it's close.
All right, Dave, we are out of here. Thanks to Dave Richard. Thanks to Jamie. Dave and Jamie did this show early for me, so I appreciate that. And Jamie had to run. He wasn't being rude or anything. So thank you to both of you for accommodating, and to Tom Schaefer as well. I think I may have just called him Tom. That was weird. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Tomorrow.